to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're making something a little different, a little quirky, a little weird. It's right up my alley. I love quirky and weird. Today, we are making the backyard caddy from Sallie Tomato. Is this a bag? I mean, it's a bag, right? It's a bag. It's a caddy, but it holds things like a bag, right? So this is such a fun, unique make. It holds your bottles. I have a bunch of soda bottles in here. You can put whatever kind of bottles you want in this. This is, in my opinion, such a fun gift to make for summer of 2021. You got vaccinated, your family got vaccinated, you can finally see some of your friends, some of your families. It's summer, it's warm, finally. I feel like we had a very cold winter this year. You want to go to a barbecue, you want to bring a gift, you don't want it to cost a lot of money, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time making it because you just want to get your butt out the door to hang out with your friends. This is a fun one to make. Fill it with your favorite drinks, with their favorite drinks. Fun fabric. And bring it, and you know what? Just celebrate. Just celebrate. That's all. Just celebrate. So, this is the first version I made. Here, I'm going to take out all the bottles so I can show it to you a little bit better. These are all sodas. All sodas. It's Monday, guys. It's not even noon yet. Sodas. Okay, so here it is empty. You can see inside we have 6 little compartments. These do move. They are not attached to the side. So if you had bigger items and you wanted to move some of those flaps out of the way, you could definitely do that. So again, if you want to move these out of the way and put like boxes of crackers, boxes of cookies, things like that, if you want to use this in a different way, definitely you can do that. The pattern has a piece of binding around the top here. Today, we're actually not going to be doing the binding because I know so many, as soon as I say the B word, so many of you were like, I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with binding. I hear you. I'm not always going to help you with that. Sometimes we gotta do the binding. Today, we don't have to do the binding. I'm gonna show you how to not do the binding. So you have the outer fabric, you have the lining fabric, you have this little handle here. We're gonna tweak that just a bit. I'm using a lot of rivets today. So I'm using 1, 2, 4, 6, 10. I'm using 10 rivets today. You cannot use any rivets. You could just use stitches for all of this. You don't have to use any rivets. I like to use the rivets. I think it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit prettier. It's a lot more durable. I do not have to worry about stitches over here on the side ripping if I'm shoving a bunch of stuff in here. So I prefer the rivets. So this was the first version I made. Vinyl on the bottom, vinyl handle, canvas, and then quilt cotton for the lining. Here is the second version I made where I tweaked a couple things. You can see on this one, no binding. See that all around the top edge right there? We're gonna birth this. We're not going to bind it. And let me take out the drinks in this one as well. I got a lot of soda to drink, guys. This is exciting. I'm gonna have a party. I'm gonna be so caffeinated. Okay, so for this one here, I actually used vinyl for the exterior, vinyl for the front, the sides, and then I used cork for the handle. I'm doubling up my interfacing because you really want a lot of interfacing on this handle, especially if you're gonna fill it with glass bottles. You don't want this to rip or bend too much. For the lining, I actually used this nylon ripstop. Now, I'm not gonna use that in the video today, but it's fantastic because it's waterproof. So vinyl and then the ripstop, I didn't have to use any woven interfacing whatsoever. It's just Decoville heavy vinyl ripstop. Fantastic. And then I used cork for the base as well. In today's tutorial, we're gonna be mixing it up a lot. We're gonna use some quilt cotton. We're gonna use some vinyl. I'm going to be using quilt cotton for the lining. I do highly encourage you to use something that's waterproof, especially if you're gonna put like cold beverages in here that are gonna sweat. The ripstop is really great. The nylon ripstop is really great. Once I play with that some more, I'll do more tutorials where we use it. I still have to get a little bit more comfortable with it. Waterproof canvas would also be fantastic for the lining for this because you don't really have a whole lot of small nooks and crannies. You see, I mean, it's hard to see because it's all black, but this is a really fun, unique pattern, guys. So thank you so much to the team over at Sallie Tomato for allowing me to film this tutorial. I'm so excited to do this one, guys. A lot of you guys have actually asked me about this because it is so unique. I don't see a whole lot of people making it. I hope after this video we change that because this is a fantastic summer gift. Oh. I'm just saying, you know you're watching right now and you're thinking like, oh man, I can't wait to go to a barbecue. I can't wait to go to a pool party. I can't wait to do something somewhat normal in the summer where I can bring something like this. This is a fun one. You're gonna like this one. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all you want to say, leave them down in the comment section. This is not a hard or long, tedious thing to make. It's a quick project, to be completely honest. And once you make the first one, the rest of them come together very, very quickly. So the tutorial is not going to be terribly long today, I hope, if all things go as planned. But I will have timestamps still for every single part of this pattern, so just check the bottom of the video here. We have little chapter markers, and you can just click there. It'll take you straight there in the video. Each timestamp is also listed in the description right down below. All right, let's get started. Okay, so here is the fabric I'm going to be using today. I like to mix it up. For the exterior, I'm actually going to use some of this vinyl and also some of this quilt cotton right here. I'm just going to use a little bit of the quilt cotton for the front and back panels. Other than that, though, I will be using this thin vinyl. If you're using the vinyl, you don't need to interface it with woven interfacing. Really, the woven interfacing is just for quilt cotton. So lining or exterior, anything that's quilt cotton, you want to add some woven interfacing to it. So I'll be using some of this. This fabric is just hilarious to me. I need to make sure it's all appropriate. I'm pretty sure this is for the most part appropriate. And then a nice thinner vinyl. You could use a thicker vinyl here too, honestly. You really don't have many limitations with this. You can use whatever you have. For the contrast, which is the base of the caddy and then also the handle, I'm going to be using this fun cork right here. This cork is also from Sallie Tomato. I'll have it linked down below if it's still available. And then for the lining, I'm going to use quilt cotton. I do highly suggest you use something that's waterproof, like waterproof canvas, maybe pull fabric, or the nylon ripstop that I used. Something waterproof would be great. If you're using a waterproof fabric, you do not have to add any woven interfacing to it. Quilt cotton, though, I would add the woven interfacing. For your exterior fabric, you're going to need about a half a yard. Again, if you're mixing it up, it could be less than that. For your contrast, you just need a small amount, really, like a fat quarter, maybe, whatever, I don't know. Get a roll of something and just keep it to the side. For your lining, I would up it to a full yard of fabric, just in case you make a mistake. So here's the interfacing we're going to be using today. Like I said, anything that's quilt cotton, just go ahead and add a layer of your woven interfacing. I have Pellon SF101. It's going to work great for that today. The heavy interfacing is really the key though. Decoville heavy, Peltex, something that's nice and firm and heavy is what you're gonna wanna use. We need this caddy to keep its structure when it's holding heavy bottles. For the handle, you could even use a cut of like a thin cutting mat. You know those cutting mats we get from the Dollar Tree or Dollar General, one of those inexpensive stores, and we can cut them out and use them for pattern pieces. That would also be a great option today for the handle because you don't want the handle to get saggy. We're gonna actually double up this and I'm gonna show you that to make it a little bit firmer. All right, here's a bunch of the other stuff we'll be using today. I'm a big fan of rivets in this pattern instead of stitching in some places, so I will be using my rivet press. I'm using a Cam Snaps rivet press. I have a whole video going over this press and everything I like to use with it, so if you're interested in that, I will have that link down in the description of the video. I'll be using these 9mm rivets to go with that. A healthy supply of clips is always good. Purse feet on this caddy is completely optional. I have not used them yet. This is gonna be the first time I try them, but let's just give it a try. Here's my little bag tag. You could add a woven one, you can just skip it, whatever you want. But if you have a bag tag, this is a fun one to add it to. I have a handheld hole punch because it's a little bit easier to punch some of these holes for my rivets with the handheld hole punch in this specific pattern. Fabric scissors. I have a few different marking tools, one for marking on vinyl, one for marking on fabric that will erase, another one to mark on dark fabric. Seam ripper and stiletto combo is always helpful. Double-sided tape is going to be very, very helpful today. I do suggest the thicker leather double-sided tape because we do need to kind of hold some things in place a little bit stronger. So this is a 1/4 inch double-sided tape. The needles I'll be using predominantly today are the Microtex 8012. However, in the end, for top stitching, I usually will bump it up to a 9014, especially if I'm going through that really thick Decoville heavy interfacing. I always have my 1" by 6" ruler on hand. The thread that's in my bobbin is the Mara 100 thread, which is a little bit thinner, but it's a polyester and nice and strong. And then the thread for my top stitching, so my top needle is going to be a Mara 70. It's also polyester, very, very strong, but it is a little bit beefier, so it looks a little bit nicer in the end result. All right, here are all the pattern pieces. There's actually not a whole lot to this. It's a fun one, guys. Let's go with the front and back first. So this is gonna be the front and the back of the Caddy. These are just rectangles. The measurements for all of these are in the pattern. For this, I'm using this woven fabric, so like quilt cotton. I have 2 cuts. Both of these are interfaced with my SF101. From the lining, I also have 2 cuts of quilt cotton interfaced with SF101. And then you're gonna have 2 smaller cuts of your Decoville Heavy to help provide structure for this part of the bag. Next, we have the sides. Now you will be using a pattern piece to draw these ones out because they have a little triangle shape. I'm using vinyl for the sides, so I have 2 cuts of my exterior fabric with vinyl. I don't have any interfacing at all on it. And then for the lining, I have 2 cuts of my quilt cotton. Both of these have the SF101. And then you're gonna have 2 separate cuts of your Decoville Heavy or your Peltex, whatever firm interfacing you're using. You're gonna need 2 of those for the side panel. All right, next we have the base of the bag. So you can use the same as your exterior if you'd like, or you can use a contrast. I have this fun cork, it's gonna be the base. It does not have any interfacing on it. If you're using quilt cotton, you're gonna wanna interface it with your SF101. The lining does have the woven interfacing, and then you have a smaller cut of my Decoville Heavy. All right, next is the handle. For the handle, you're gonna have 1 cut of your contrasting fabric. So I do suggest something sturdier. Remember, this is gonna be holding things. So I have cork here. It's not the thickest cork in the world, but I think it'll do. To help it though, we're gonna be beefing it up with some Decoville Heavy here. So I'm actually cutting 2 of these from template handle stabilizer A from my Decoville Heavy, and then you're gonna also have this little handle stabilizer B to kind of beef up that top piece. We'll go over how to construct this, but I do suggest doubling up on this pattern piece with your firmer stabilizer. Okay, this next piece is going to be the center divider of your Caddy. So it's, it's gonna hold on to the handle. It's gonna go down the center of your Caddy just like that. I like using vinyl because vinyl is water resistant. If it gets wet, I don't have to worry about it. It's a nice big cut here. And then you're going to have 3 cuts of stabilizer to go with it, 2 smaller ones, 1 bigger one. I will show you how to apply all of that. And finally, the drink dividers. Now, honestly, if you don't want to use this for drinks, and you don't want any dividers, you could just skip this completely and then use it for whatever you want. But if you're going to be using it for drinks, you're going to want 4 cuts of your dividers. If you're using quilt cotton or cotton lycra, anything like that, you're going to want to interface it with your woven interfacing. I'm using vinyl, so I don't have an interface with anything. And then you're going to have 4 cuts of your firm stabilizer to go with this. These are obviously a different size. Okay, the pattern is first gonna have you build your binding. Like I said, we're not using binding today, so we're skipping that. Next, you're gonna fuse your interfacing, which means your woven interfacing. So any sort of quilt material you have, quilt cotton lycra, anything like that, make sure you interface it with your woven interfacing. The pattern also comes with some really fun SVGs if you wanna download that and use like your Cricut or your Silhouette to cut out some fun designs. That would be really cool. I haven't tried it, but they look really cool in the pattern. But we're just gonna skip right over to assembling the handle. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take one of your handle stabilizer A's and then grab your handle stabilizer B and just center it along the top edge. Now you could measure this out to make it exact. I'm fine with it. I eyeball it just like that. Now actually what we're going to do is just stitch this in place, which I know is kind of crazy because we're stitching stabilizer to stabilizer, but we're going to do. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch over this smaller rectangle right here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just to really hold it in place exactly where we want it. Okay, after you have that stitched onto one of your stabilizer A's, you could just leave it like that, but I find it needs a little bit more beef. So I actually have a second cut using that pattern piece, and I'm going to fuse these glue sides together. So, this might be, you might have stitched, the rectangle onto the glue side and then it would be nicely in between them, but I didn't have that foresight. So I'm just going to stick these so that they're glue sides together, and then I'm gonna take my iron and just iron it. I'm not ironing on a glue side, okay? Don't stick this to your iron, guys. Don't do it. I'm just melting the glue on both pieces so that they stick together, and I have this double Decoville Heavy handle, which is going to help support the Caddy. Ooh, look at all that steam. Okay, it doesn't have to be completely fused and perfect. We just want it to stay together. You could also just stitch these together if you're more comfortable doing that. So now I'm going to take my handle contrasting fabric and I'm going to fold it wrong sides together to create the handle. And I'm most focused on getting this fold right here at the top. So I'm just gonna fold it and add a clip Go down the entire length, folding and adding a clip. Okay, now we want to take our stabilizer and we just want to slide it in here and include it in this fold. So I like to fold it first so I kind of get an idea of where it's going. And then I'll open it, slide this right in, right up against the fold. So you see there should be space on the sides and on the bottom. Just like that, and then refold it right around there, hugging it, matching up all the raw edges. There we go. All right, so now I have it tucked in there. And you can see these sides and under here, this is gonna be kept raw. So that's why you wanna make sure you use a vinyl or a cork, something where you don't mind these edges being raw. This is a little suspect, honestly, because there is some like canvas with this cork, so I think we'll be okay. We'll be fine. All right, now let's take this to the sewing machine. We're gonna top stitch along every single edge, including the folded edge, the raw edges, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. There we go. This should be nice and firm. Now, to be honest, I might actually go around these raw edges on the sides and the inner part right here with some fray check, just because this does have that canvas and I'm a little worried about it unraveling. Okay, so here's a little bottle of fray check I have here, and I'm just going to very gently go along the edge here, trying not to make a mess, and this will just help prevent anything from fraying. I'm not worried about the bottom edges of this handle because that will be in a seam. All right, so I have that fray check applied. I'm just gonna let this dry while we continue on with the pattern. Now we're gonna make the beverage dividers. I would say this is probably the most work, maybe the most challenging part of the pattern. It's not bad, but it is the most work out of the pattern. So you're gonna take your 4 cuts for your beverage dividers, and you're gonna fold them right sides together along the short edge, just like that. All right, once you have each of them folded and pinned on the top raw edge here, you're gonna measure down 1 inch and you're gonna make a mark, because we're just going to sew from that 1 inch down from the top edge all the way to the fold at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance on each one of these on both sides. So we're not sewing on the fold, we're not sewing on this open short edge. We're just sewing from that mark, which is 1 inch down from the raw edges here, and we're gonna sew at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance to the fold. Okay, once you have these sewn, grab your scissors and cut down the edge where the fold is. So down here where the stitches are and there's a fold, just cut down that corner like that. So don't trim all the way past the stitching, but you can see I'm just trimming like a little triangle and I'm not going past the stitching up here. Do this for each one of them. So now we're gonna turn them right sides out. So through that raw edge opening, just push your fabric out. You may find it useful to grab a turning tool, whatever you prefer, to get those corners poked out. We want these corners to be really nice and straight. Okay, so if you're using quilt cotton here, you're gonna wanna push out these seams to get the whole unit to be a nice rectangle, and then you can press it with your iron to get it really flat. Since I'm using vinyl, I'm just gonna finger press this like that. You know what? I actually had somebody send me a letter recently talking about finger pressing and how that can be difficult for a lot of people. So I wanted to mention this tool here. This is from Violet Craft. This is a pressing tool. It's just like a little tiny roller. And what you can do is you can use this to roll and press seams if you don't want to use your hands. I totally understand if it's too much work for your fingers. So you can just press, kind of push it out, get it straight, and then push down with this roller and it'll help get it nice and flat. Okay, now this is how I like to do it. So we have our folded edge over here, and you can see I have the seam allowance folded in, wrong sides together. So when I flip this up, you see those edges there? They're folded like that. I'm gonna flip it all the way up. So I'm flipping it up 1 inch. You see? I'm gonna grab a clip and I'm gonna clip right down here at the bottom fold to hold it in place. Now I've got my very sticky double-sided tape, and I'm going to attach it over the side folds and along the raw edge that's folded up just like this. I don't need it to go off the edge, so I'm going to keep it shorter than the total width, okay? And then I'm going to remove the paper on the tape. I remove the clips, and I'm going to fold this entire unit down to meet that fold on the bottom. So now I have a 1/2 inch folded down. And you can see now I have this little flap just like that. And that's how we're gonna attach it in the Caddy. So let's do the back side the same way. So I'm just gonna fold this out of the way. You can grab some clips so that it doesn't distract me. Okay, so once again, you see the raw edges here? I have that seam folded in. This is not straight, right? The seams are folded in. They're folded in a 1/2 inch because that was our seam allowance, was 1/2 inch. I'm gonna grab my double-sided tape. And the stickier the better here, guys. If it's not sticky enough, this isn't gonna work. I'm gonna run it along the raw edge up here at the top. And I just wanna make sure it's holding down these sides. That's pretty much the goal here, just to hold down those sides. You can cut it, and then I'm gonna remove the paper. And then I'm gonna fold this wrong sides down all the way to meet the other side here. So that should give me another 1/2 inch. This can be a very difficult step to keep precise. I just want you to know it's okay if it's messy. Don't think that if this step here gets messy, then it's gonna be messed up. It's not, okay? This is not a really noticeable feature. This is structural, it's not cosmetic. So don't worry so much if it doesn't look great. All right, so once you have them both folded, then take another piece of double-sided tape and run it along the folded bottom. And this is gonna be how we attach it to that center divider. So just trim it down. So attach your tape on both flaps. All right, there you go. So now you should have your flap just like this. Then grab one of your Decoville Heavy pieces, and it should slide in lengthwise. Now, every single time my Decoville Heavy has been too long. You see if I put it on like this, my Decoville Heavy is long. I'm just gonna trim off a 1/4 inch. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it, trim down a 1/4 inch off of the length. There we go. And then I'm gonna fold it and tug it in there. So if you have to adjust, that's okay. You can trim it down. It should be pretty firm in there. All right, once you have it all the way tucked in, it should look just like this. You can see my Decoville Heavy edge is right here. It's pushed in as far as I can get it. It's tucked in nice and firm. So when I attach this, I'm just gonna attach it like that. You see? It's not that bad. You can do this. Again, if it's sloppier than you want, if that frustrates you, just keep going, okay? That's the thing with this whole project. Most of these steps are structural. They're not cosmetic, so just keep going until it's done, okay? So go ahead and repeat that for your other 3 beverage dividers. So once you have all 4 of your beverage dividers all prepped and ready to go, just set them to the side for a moment. And then you're gonna grab your center divider. This is like the bigger cut. Now I'm using vinyl here. You can use whatever you want. But you're gonna make some marks on this. You're gonna make 2 lines going vertically the long way and then 2 horizontal marks. The measurements for this are in the pattern. Make sure you make those marks. And then you can flip it over, and then along the 2 long edges, I marked in 1 inch. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to fold this wrong sides together so that I'm folding this long edge on each side up a 1/2 inch. Now, if you're using quilt cotton here or anything that you can iron, you can just press this with an iron and let it be. Since I'm using vinyl, I have to add the tape or glue, whichever you're more comfortable working with. So I'm just gonna grab this double-sided tape and I'm going to run it right underneath my 1 inch mark, just like this, along the entire long edge. And then I can just take this long raw edge and fold it up wrong sides together to meet that mark, and it should cover the tape as well. And that's just gonna hold this in place for me. All right, go ahead and repeat this with the other long edge, either ironing or taping it, just getting these long edges folded in wrong sides together at a 1/2 inch. All right, once you have those folded in, turn it right side up. And I don't know if you can see on here, but there's intersections. There's an intersection between my vertical and my horizontal line. So we're gonna start with the top here. So at this first top left intersection of my lines, I'm going to take one of my beverage dividers. And what I wanna do is I wanna line this up so that the top edge of my beverage divider is right underneath that intersection. So you see the center of my beverage divider is going to cover that long skinny line, and then the top edge of it is going to be right below the horizontal line. So it's just, you know, the top intersection goes with that intersection. So I'm going to take one piece of paper off the tape. Do your best to line up the top edge and also to line up the midpoint along this bottom vertical line here. Again, if it's a little angled, that's okay. You're never going to notice this. This is, again, structural. I don't know. So once you have one side taped down, just take off the paper from the other side. Use those guidelines to keep everything nice and straight. And see, there you go. And that's how it's going to hold the drink in place. So when you have all four of them and you fold it in half, you see? Isn't that cool? I love that. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to walk you through each one of these. So now I'm going to the top right intersection. So I have my vertical line and my horizontal line, and right where they intersect is where I want to match up my beverage divider. It's going to be right below the horizontal line and then just centered over the vertical line. So this is easiest if you just take one tape at a time. Okay, so I have one side taped down. I have the other one left to go, so I'm going to remove this tape. And you see, this is why we use so much tape, especially with vinyl, because if you didn't use tape, you'd have so many raw edges going all over the place. This would be a mess. There we go. Now we have two ready to go. And that nice firm interfacing just keeps this so it stays nice and upright. This is such a cool pattern. So what we can do actually just to make this easier, let's just rotate this whole thing around. So once again, we're working with the top left and right intersections. So I'm just going to repeat this just like I did before. All right, there's number 3. And now let's just apply the last one to the top right intersection. Everything should be lined up. See, they're all lined up together. Nothing, you don't have one way over here, and you know what I mean. Alrighty, check that out. Isn't that fun? I love these. Okay, so now we have to stitch these down to make sure they stay in place. If you're using vinyl and that really sticky tape, it's very unlikely this will come off, but we need to stitch it down. So we're going to stitch down along each of these flaps. So this flap that's taped down, so you see right here, this little rectangle, and then also on this side, this little rectangle, we're going to stitch around it at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You might find this easiest to use a zipper foot. Since this gets kind of beefy, when you push it down, you have kind of a big bump right here and then a thinner part here. So getting your presser foot to go right over it can be tricky. So I like to use a zipper foot so that way I can just get right next to that crease all the way around. Do this for every single flap holding it down. So each one of our beverage dividers will have 2 sides that need to be stitched down. We did it. I know it's kind of a lot of stitching, but I would say that's probably the hardest part. Okay, so once you have them all stitched in place, grab your handle and take your handle and lay it so that the raw edges are going to be along the same line as the raw edges on the top flap. You might need to fold down these beverage dividers, and your beverage divider handle should be the same width as the top edge here. If it's a little bigger or smaller, it's fine. It doesn't actually go along the entire edge, so you can kind of finagle it. There we go. So just clip down your handle just like that. So you see I have the handle facing down, clipped raw edges to the raw edges on the right side of my beverage dividers. Now, take your beverage center unit, fold it up right sides together, just pushing down those dividers to keep them out of the way. And so your handle is sandwiched in between the 2 edges, and you should have the wrong side of your center divider facing out. Just clip all of it together, just like that. So now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that stitched, you can put this to the side. So now grab your center stabilizer A, which is this bigger rectangle, and then your 2 center stabilizer Bs. And first you're going to take one of your stabilizer Bs and line it up so it's about 1/4 inch from the top and in from the sides along the long edge of your stabilizer A. You can just clip that in place, just like that. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch this down at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now the pattern says to repeat this with your second B piece on the opposite side of A. I'm not quite sure if that means down here or on the back. I've done both and both have been fine. I think it means on the back because we want this part up here to be very firm and stay in place, and we're okay with this moving around a little bit more where the the bigger part of the bottles are, but this one here we want to be straight. So I'm gonna apply it up here, but either way works. So what I'm actually doing is just kind of using the light from my window to see the shadow of the other piece, and I'm just going to match this up and cover it, and then I'll take this to the machine and just top stitch this down at 1/8 inch seam allowance, just like I did on this side. Okay, now take your center divider and flip it right side out. All right, here we go. It's flipped right side out. Let's pull along all the edges to get everything as straight as possible. I want a nice rectangle here, so I'm going to use clips to help me. You can use your iron here if you're using quilt cotton for this material. Okay, once you have this flattened out, you're going to take that stabilizer with the rectangles on the top, if you added it on both the top sides, front and back, and just slide this in. It should be very snug. It should not extend all the way to the sides. So it is narrower, it's shorter on the sides, right? Because we don't want to see it in the end. So just get it in there, tuck it in, and then we want to close up these sides. So make sure it's not peeking through on the edge anywhere. I'm going to use clips here to hold everything in place and get this to be as flat a rectangle as possible. So now we're going to top stitch this, all 4 edges of this panel right here. We're not worried about the handle. The handle's pretty much done. We'll add rivets later. We're just focused on this rectangle down here. We're going to top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, that stabilizer should not be seen in the edge at all here. When we close this up, it should be tucked inside. There you go. That's your center divider. Isn't that cool? It should be very firm. If you've been using the tape and the Decoville Heavy and all of that like I have, your needle is probably pretty gummy right now, so you might want to take an alcohol wipe and clean it off. I do suggest when you're done with this project, if you used all the junk that I'm using, just change your needle, throw out your needle. Your needle's not going to be any good after this. But look how cool that is. Isn't that pretty? Okay, set this to the side. Okay, so now let's fuse on our heavy stabilizer to our outer pieces. So this is my base, my bottom. I'm going to flip it wrong side up. I'm going to center my Decoville Heavy over it just like that. I'm going to cover it with a scrap piece of fabric. And then using an iron with a lot of steam, I'm going to fuse it in place. All right, so I have that fused onto the base. Now I'm going to fuse stabilizer onto the front and the back panels. Now this is quilt cotton here, so I can fuse it from the front. So I'm just going to center it and then flip it. And then I will fuse it with steam from the front. When I'm working with cork or vinyl, I like to fuse the Decoville from the back. But with quilt cotton, I can fuse it from the front. And it fuses better from the front. All right, now that I have the front and back done, I'm going to do the same thing with the sides. My sides are vinyl, so I'm going to fuse it from the back, and I'm just going to flip it wrong side up, glue side of my Decoville down, and then I'll just cover that with my pressing cloth. All right, once we have that Decoville Heavy or Peltex, that firmer interfacing applied to your outer panels, let's do a little bit of decorative prep work. So first, I'm going to attach my bag tag to one of the rectangle outer panels. You do it wherever you want. I centered my spot on the bottom edge and then 2 inches up. So centered along the long edge, 2 inches up from the bottom. I'm using the washer for my bag tag, and I'm just going to mark these slits for the prongs of my bag tag. I'm then going to grab my seam ripper, and I will just rip along those slits. Not farther than them though. We want this to be a tight fit, not a loose fit. Take my bag tag and just insert the prongs into those slits. Flip it over, put down the washer, fold over the prongs however you'd like. If you'd like, you could also cover this, so just grab some of your glue, and I have a piece of fusible fleece here. Any sort of interfacing would work. Even a scrap piece of vinyl would be fine. We just want to cover these prongs so they don't rub against the lining fabric and then create a hole in it, especially since we're using that quill cotton. If I was using waterproof canvas for my lining, I wouldn't be so concerned about it. All right, so I just glued that, and I'm just gonna put it over the back. There we go. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to protect it. All right, so now my bag tag is done. Okay, now let's insert our feet. So the pattern tells you how far to mark down for your feet, so go ahead and mark dots on the back of your base for that. I'm gonna grab my washers for my feet, and I'm just going to center them on those marks. Draw the prong slits, just like this. And just like I did with the bag tag, I'm gonna use my seam ripper here to rip very small slits where I mark those straight lines. And these will just be where the prongs for the feet slide through. So here's one of my little purse feet. I'm gonna go to the front, try to find those slits, and then just slide those into place. Grab the washer and slide it over the feet, and then separate them. There we go, nice and tight. And there is one of my purse feet. So I'm gonna do that with the other three as well. All right, and if you'd like, you can cover these with interfacing as well to protect the lining. There we go, that looks cute. I don't think this is necessary, but it is really, really cute. I like that, especially with this cord. That looks so fancy, doesn't it? That's funny, I like it. All right, now let's build the exterior. So take your bottom panel and lay it right side up. Take either your front or back panel and lay it right side up, and then fold it right side down along the long edge. Make sure you're paying attention to direction here so your print doesn't end up upside down. The bottom of that front panel should be along the long edge here. Grab some clips and just clip it in place. So as you can see, I grabbed a ruler and I measured in 3/8 of an inch from the side and drew a line. So 3/8 of an inch from each side, draw a line, because these are gonna be your starting and stopping points. When we stitch this down, we're not going off the edges. We're gonna go in 3/8 of an inch on each side. To save time, I'm also going to attach my back flap. So I'm gonna rotate my panel so I have the bottom right side up still. This other flap is kind of out of the way. This is my back panel here. I'm gonna line that up how I want it in the end. Fold it down right sides together. Clip along this long edge. And then for the back panel, I did the same thing. I measured in 3/8 of an inch and just drew a line so I know where to start and stop. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna sew along each of these long edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, starting and stopping at my marked lines. Make sure you backstitch each time. Go. You see this cute? I love that. It's so cute. Okay, so now we're going to attach the sides. To make it easier, I'm going to make my marks before I pin it in place. Okay, so once again, I marked in 3/8 of an inch on each side just so I know where to start and stop. Here is my exterior unit. I'm going to open it up so I have the bottom right side up. I'm going to take one of my side flaps and lay it right side down. Go ahead and move the front and back panels out of the way so that you can access the edge here. So we're just going to move this out of the way, corner to corner, match up the side panels with the bottom panel. So I do the corners first. Again, just moving the front panel and back panel fabric out of the way. It shouldn't be stitched down, so you should be able to get it out of the way. And then I'll clip the whole unit together just like this. All right, so this is what I have. I'm gonna attach the other side panel the same way, again, just to save time. So I'm just moving the front and back panel fabric out of the way so that I can see the corners of my base unit. Lay this right side down and attach corner to corner. Okay, now we're gonna sew along these two clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, starting and stopping at your marked lines. backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, there we go. We got the sides and the front and the back. So now we just got to put it all together. So let's start with one side. We're just going to pull up the side panel, and for me this is the front panel. And we're going to line them up. So start at the bottom. They're not going to reach each other on the top here. The front panel is taller than the top edge of the side panel. That's okay. Pull that base panel out of the way and line up the corners of the side and the front panel. Clip that together and then just clip along the entire edge. Alright, so now we can take this and sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning, and then you're just going to stop once you get to your stitching. You should see your 3/8 of an inch seam down here. Just stop once you get there. You don't have to go all the way to the end. Okay, you see, when you have that stitch, it should be just like this. You don't have any hole down here. All of your stitching kind of meets up in the same spot. None of it really crosses over, but it all comes together in this one corner here really nicely. So now just repeat that for the other 3 edges. There we go. We got a nice cute little bucket, right? So now what we're going to do is just trim down these seam allowances. I'm just going to trim them in half. We just don't want all this bulk here. Be very careful to make sure you don't trim any of your stitching on accident. So I'm just going to start with the sides and then I'll do the base. Alrighty, once you're done with that, just set this to the side. So now we're going to repeat that with the lining mostly. So with our lining, base right side up, grab one of your lining front or back panels and line it up along the long edges and fold it right side down. So right side to right side. Okay, this time we're going to measure in 5/8 of an inch from the sides. So it's bigger. We're going to have a bigger seam allowance here. So 5/8 of an inch from each side. And then I also marked a 5-inch opening along the bottom edge of this straight edge. This is going to be to turn the whole unit out later. Since we're not going to do the binding, we will have to birth this. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on this right here. So make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end right here. These are short stitches here, but backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. Leave this opening right here. And when you sew this, we're sewing at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have one edge sewn on, so I'm just going to flip that out of the way. Again, I have my base lining right side up. I'm going to take my other front or back unit, whichever one you want to call it, and lay it right side down, matching up those long edges. Once again, mark in from the sides 5/8 of an inch, but this time we're not leaving any sort of hole along the long edge. We only need that on one side. So for this one, we're just going to sew along the entire edge at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance between these two marks. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now I have the rectangles attached. I'm going to prep my sides now. So I'm going to lay my side lining panels wrong side up. And then once again, I measured in 5/8 of an inch from the sides on both of them. And now I'm going to take my base, laying it right side up, and I'm going to fold the rectangle sides that I already have stitched down. I'm going to fold those out of the way so that I can take my side panel and lay it right sides together, matching up those straight edges. And then I can clip together those corners first, and then I'll just clip the entire edge. I'm going to repeat that with the other side panel. So once again, I'm just going to fold the stuff out of the way. I'm going to do both of these at once so that I can save some time. Okay, so now I have both of my side panels clipped in place. I'm going to sew along both of these clipped edges at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end where your marks are. All right, you got them all attached. Now we're going to sew up the sides. So take one of your rectangles and one of your side panels and just line them up. I always like to line up the corners first, and I push that bottom panel out of the way, that corner from the bottom panel. I don't want a big bulky seam down here. I don't need to include that. So I'm just going to clip the side and the front panels together first. Now for these sides, when we start at the top, we're going to start at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and as we go down, we're going to increase our seam allowance to 5/8 of an inch. So you should end right where your stitches start down here on the bottom. But at the top, it needs to be a 3/8 inch seam allowance. That's important so that we can put the whole thing together in the end. So we're going to go through all 4 corners sewing it just like that. right, there you go. You have a nice little lining bowl. Isn't that cute? So now we're going to cut down this seam allowance just like we did on the exterior. You can try to cut this down to 1/8 of an inch or whatever you're comfortable with. If you don't like getting that close to the stitches, and then don't cut that small. So on the side here that has that opening, I'm not going to cut down the seam where that opening is. So I'm just going to cut down where the stitches are here on the side. But see this open part right here? I'm not going to cut down that seam because it's going to make it easier for me to close it later if I leave that long. Alrighty, so now we're going a little rogue, okay? I'm going to take my lining and flip it right side out. So I've got my exterior wrong side out, my lining right side out. And I'm just going to insert my lining into the exterior, rotate it so that the sides are matched up with the sides. And now let's pin together all of the seams first. So the seams between the side and the front and back on the exterior. Same with the lining. Match those up, add a clip. Do this for all 4 seams. Once you have the corners clipped, now we can go through and clip all the sides as well. So I start with the sides because they have that little triangle on the top. And then I'll do the straight edges on the front and back. And remember, this is not in the pattern. We're changing this so we don't have to use binding, okay? So now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along the entire top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're using vinyl for your exterior, you might want to do a second row of stitching just to make sure it's nice and firm and you don't see the stitches in the end. Go slow because we do have some weird angles here. I'm actually going to remove the bed on my sewing machine so I have just the arm and I can kind of wrap this around the arm as I'm sewing. You could also sew this from the inside if you're more comfortable doing it that way. There we go. So it gets a little tricky around these seams right here. I just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be exact. That's okay. So now I'm going to go around and just trim my seam allowance in half all the way around this top edge. And for these top rounded edges on the side here, it's a good idea to cut into the seam allowance about halfway and just make little slits so that way this can round off really nicely. You only need to do it around the rounded part on the top right there. All right, there we go, moment of truth. So this hole is not that big, so you gotta be careful. Just carefully push out the exterior through that hole in your lining. You might find this easier to flip around the whole thing so that the exterior is inside and the lining is wrong side out, and then you can just kind of wrap the lining around the exterior to pull it all out. Okay, so you can see I carefully have pulled my lining around the exterior, and then I'll reach in the hole and just smooth out the exterior. I know it's probably very wrinkled right now. We can heat it up in a little bit to help get out those wrinkles. All right, there we go. So now what we want to do is tuck in our lining. And now I like to leave that hole open so that I can easily go around and roll out any of these seams that are giving me trouble. So we want to roll these seams down so we don't see the lining peeking out on the exterior. And I just like to grab clips and clip it the way I want it. So I'm going to go around the entire top edge here, rolling the seam nice and straight and then clipping it to hold it in place. All right, there we go. We have the top edge clipped. Now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along the top folded edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to kind of wrap it around the arm of my sewing machine. So I did remove the bed, and that's going to give me a better view of the top edge here. How cute this is looking. I really like that we added vinyl on the sides here. I think that helps a lot with the structure of this. Okay, so the last bit of sewing I'm gonna be doing is closing up this hole. Remember I had this hole here to turn the whole thing out? I'm just gonna pull it up, and then I just put my hands in the sides like this, and then fabric will naturally fold down, so you can just kind of tug on it, and then fold the fabric in so you don't have any raw edges, and then just clip along that fold. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along this folded clipped area at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I will be doing the remaining steps of this pattern using rivets. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert that divider into our little bucket, and then we're going to attach everything together. So let's first start with the sides. On the side here, I'm going to fold it in half. And if you remember that Decoville or Peltex has like a little V cut out of it right here. So this should be a little bit thinner. So I'm just gonna fold it in half and then add a clip just like that. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Just folding the side. And now I'm gonna take my center panel and I'm gonna insert it into the bag portion here. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take this side over here and I'm just gonna wrap it around the side of my center panel. Now I'm gonna have this center panel come up about 1/4 of an inch above the top edge of my side over here. And that's because once we get everything clipped and pinned, what happens is the bottom of this center panel kind of pushes down on the middle of the base here, and you get kind of like a bowl effect. It's not flat. So if you can get your center panel here up a little bit higher, maybe like 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch higher, that will help keep this flat down here. So I'm just going to wrap it around, and I'm going to add 2 clips to hold it down. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So you can see I'm pulling this in, also about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. The center panel is going to be up over the edge of the side, and then add some clips a little bit further down too. There we go. So this is kind of what we have. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 rivets on each side here where the clips are to hold it all together. And you really want to make sure this stays straight because it will try to twist on you. It wants to go away. So I'm measuring 1/2 of an inch down from the top edge of my side panel here and about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch in towards the center. And then I'm just going to mark a dot right there. And then I'm just going to measure about 1/2 of an inch down from that dot, and then again 3/8 of an inch in from the fold on the side over here and mark another dot. So this is the placement for my rivets, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to punch these out now. So I have my hole punch here, punch out 1 hole. There's a lot of layers here, so make sure you really get it all out. And then I'm just going to quickly grab one of my rivets and install it and just snap it shut to hold it in place for now. It is very thick. I'm gonna punch out the second hole as well, and then I'll add another rivet in there. There we go. So now I have this side attached. You can see it came undone over here. That's fine. So I'm just gonna re-wrap the other side along the middle panel here. So just like I did on the other side, I'm gonna measure down 1/2 of an inch from the top edge of the side panel and 3/8 of an inch from the fold over here on the side. So that's 1 dot. And then my second dot is just going to be 1/2 of an inch down from that. All right, there we go. Those are the 2 hardest rivets to install. So now what we're going to do is we're going to deal with the corners here. Now, you can definitely just take this to the sewing machine and just do a tiny stitch about 1/2 of an inch down to hold this in place. You just want these to be pinched because you can see it kind of bowls out like that. But when we pinch these corners here, it helps get a nice, boxy structure. So you can definitely just use your sewing machine here if you're more comfortable doing that, or you can add a rivet. So the rivet is going to really be about 1/2 of an inch down, 3/8 of an inch in, or maybe even 3/8 of an inch down, 3/8 of an inch in. We just want it right on the edge here. So as close as we can get it to the edge without, messing it up. So I'm not even measuring, I'm just eyeballing. I'm getting it right underneath my top stitching. I don't want to punch a hole in my top stitching. And I don't want the hole to be too big that it cuts off the side right here. So I'm just putting it right in the corner and adding my rivet. There we go. See, so it's just like a little kiss right there. Isn't that sweet? So now I'm going to do this for the other corners as well. Alrighty, so you see how adding those rivets, see how it pinches it, and now we have more of a box shape instead of the whole thing just bowing out like that. We don't mind it bowing out right here. It's going to be full of bottles and things, you know, but we do want these corners to stay nice and pinched. So you can also just take it down to the bottom here and just kind of pinch this down so that it creates a nice little dip, but the base stays straight. Oh, this is so cute, isn't it? Oh, this is a fun one. Okay, so let's add the rivets to the top corners here. This is optional, but it is cute. So we can do 1/2 of an inch from the top and 1/2 of an inch from the side. Or honestly, you can just eyeball it, which is what I'm gonna do because I'm kind of tired of marking things. So I'm just gonna add a couple little rivets on these top corners here for a little bit more decorative look. All right, there she is. Isn't she beautiful? This is so fun. My mom is gonna love this. Okay, so now we just have to set all the rivets. Here you go. I forgot my die was on my green press. So I have 10 rivets here. I'm just gonna run through all of them real quick. I'm just gonna slide them in my die and bam, 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 be done. All right, are you ready? This is so cute. Oh my gosh, look how fun this is. Okay, the Golden Girls. If this doesn't scream Florida pool party, I don't know what does, because this is just the best. You know what? My mom is actually hopefully going to have a pool built in her backyard over the summer. So I think this is going to be a perfect gift for her. Her and my grandmother live together in a home. So I think this would be such a fun gift to give to my mom and my grandma. I'll put a bunch of those little bottles of wine, little bottles of champagne in there for their pool. How fun is this? Oh, I love it so much. So you can see, like, this is so much fun. And if you get your Cricut Maker or your Silhouette, your vinyl cutting device involved in this, and you can put some really fun text on here, some probably more adult text on there as well. I think that would be really, really fun. But this is also a great gift for kiddos. So, you know, I know a lot of kids this summer are really hoping to make up for last summer. Make one of these with like their favorite prints. You know, go to your local craft store, grab yourself some fun Disney fabric, Marvel fabric, things like that. Make something like that. And, you know, you can put a bunch of Coke bottles or soda bottles or juice boxes in these pockets. You can just move these flaps on one side out of the way. Put in a box of graham crackers. Oh, you know what you could do? You could put in a box of graham crackers on one side, and then on the other side, put some Hershey's bars of chocolate and some marshmallows, and you have like a little s'mores kit. Oh my gosh, that's such a cute idea. I'm going to do it. Oh, that's so fun. I'm sorry. I got really excited about that, but that's what's so fun about these types of patterns. I love that. I love when we're like, oh, you know, I made something, and then it's like, oh, I can do so many things with it. So I really, really do hope you get as excited about these as I am. I hope you're excited to use it this summer. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're being safe. I hope you're looking forward to the future. I know it's been a very, very, very difficult over a year now. We got a lot of making up to do for it, right? We got a lot of friends we got to see, a lot of family we got to see. We got a lot of barbecues, pool parties, fireworks. We got a lot. We got a lot to do, okay? So this gift, if it's a gift for you, if it's a gift for a friend, loved one, kids, who wouldn't love this? Who wouldn't love this? Thank you so much for sewing with me today. Thank you, Sallie Tomato, for allowing me to play with your patterns. This, as always, 2 thumbs up. Love it. Absolutely love it. So I hope that you are having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys. Okay, I have to try out this idea. So I got my box of grams here, which honestly is a little big. So we might want to put it into bag. No, it fits. It fits. Okay, I've got a quarter eaten bar of chocolate here. We just stick that in there. And then I got some marshmallows. Let's take this out. I know these are not s'mores marshmallows, guys. I'm just testing an idea, okay? We need more chocolate. But look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, wouldn't that be a fun way to surprise your kids or something? You'd be like, we're gonna do a fire pit. We're gonna have some s'mores. Oh, I love this. Can we fit a Coke bottle in there too? You know, for mommy or daddy? A Coke bottle. There we go. Party time.